I know there are many New Zealanders right now watching this show too. Sky News goes out to your beautiful, beautiful islands. I love New Zealand, but I have to ask you, what are you doing to us? What? Your government, your Prime Minister, why are they letting Australia hang in the wind? Why are they not backing us up in this very serious confrontation with the Chinese dictatorship that's now even preparing for war in our region? Your government's latest betrayal, its latest pandering to this tyranny is this: New Zealand refusing to join 14 other countries, democracies, including your own allies, Australia, Britain, United States, Canada, won't join us in saying that the World Health Organization report on how this virus started is rubbish and that we need China to allow a proper investigation. Now, I'm talking here about the report from the team whose visit to China was very tightly controlled, the team that, despite all that, said, oh, no, this virus almost certainly did not escape from one of the 2 Chinese labs that, what a coincidence, worked on bat viruses like this in the very city, Wuhan, where this pandemic actually started. No, said this report, China is innocent. The virus came from bats via some animal we don't know. That's the most likely explanation. In fact, it said it might have even started outside China and then, hitchhiked in on frozen food, which China's been claiming. It's preposterous, but it's been claiming that to dodge responsibility for 3 million deaths around the world. Now, New Zealand would not join Australia and all those other democracies which said clearly this report is rubbish. New Zealanders, your backstabbing government said today it would not sign this joint letter that we signed, saying, no, it wants an independent analysis to ensure it understands the science before making any comment. I tell you, what a cop-out. In fact, New Zealand has plenty of time to check the draft of that report. And what's more, what's there to check? Even the head of the World Health Organization himself said on Tuesday his own report could not be trusted, had to be redone. His own organization put out a statement calling for more work to be done on all the hypotheses on how this virus started, including a leak from a Chinese lab. Now, I'm actually totally sure that this is actually New Zealand ratting out on Australia, not wanting to offend China by saying, well, it might have come from a Chinese lab. This is New Zealand sucking up to the Chinese dictatorship because this follows a pattern, a shameful pattern. We have had China for years now punishing Australia, making an example of Australia to show the world what happens to anyone who dares to criticise this dictatorship or stop its growing aggression. Stolen the South China Sea, for instance. It is China punishing Australia for asking, for instance, for an inquiry into how this virus started. A virus, may I remind New Zealand, has hit it too. This is China punishing us for standing up for freedom in Hong Kong, for standing up for democratic Taiwan, for standing up for the 1 million Muslim Chinese that China has locked up in concentration camps. And it's punishing us for standing up for freedom. And for that, we've been smashed by China. Our exports are banned, many of them. Meetings with ministers banned. 2 Australians arrested on fake charges of spying. Our soldiers smeared with a doctored photograph actually sent by China's foreign ministry around the world of an Australian soldier cutting a boy's throat. And may I ask what New Zealand has done while Australia is getting punished for standing up for freedom, which includes New Zealand's freedom? New Zealand sold us out. It has blamed us for the democracy bullying us. It's our fault. I mean, Britain has defended us. The US has defended us. Even NATO over there in Europe last week defended us. But New Zealand, the NZ in Anzac, no way. Its trade minister, what a sellout that man, told us instead to pull our head in, to go and crawl to China's dictator, so that China would perhaps then reward us like it rewards New Zealand, like with little biscuits for being a good doggy. that upgraded free trade deal it gave New Zealand just last January.
If they were to, follow us and show respect, I guess a little more diplomacy from time to time and be cautious with wording, then they too hopefully could be in a similar situation.
New Zealanders, aren't you embarrassed that China loves your trade minister telling us to kowtow to Beijing like you do? And that China even called on Australia to now copy your man in humbling ourselves. And this kind of rubbish treatment from New Zealand keeps coming. New Zealand's Foreign Affairs Minister, who wears her far left politics on her face, says Australia has to make concessions to China, while New Zealand stays out of it and just, sweet talks the communist menace instead.
Their bilateral relationship is a matter for them to resolve and work through. Do I believe that there might be an opportunity for New Zealand to create a different environment to have a conversation? Yes, I do.
Let me tell you what's really going on here and why this is so dangerous and why what New Zealand is doing is so immoral and short-sighted. It is not true that New Zealand is staying out of this. Far from it. In fact, New Zealand is acting as China's patsy, its useful idiot, its wedge of the West. Because China is not just punishing Australia for resisting this very aggressive dictatorship and showing, the world what happens to its critics. At the same time, and equally publicly, it is rewarding New Zealand for appeasing this dictatorship. It is showing the world what happens, on the other hand, to people who crawl to it. New Zealand is China's tool, the yin to our yang. And it's being used, letting itself be used, to split opposition to the growing menace that is China. To split the democracies and help the dictatorship, which is threatening to invade Taiwan very soon. New Zealanders, I love your country. But are you proud that you have a Prime Minister that sells out your friends and freedom to please a dictator? Is the Anzac tradition really so utterly, utterly dead? One final thought about China, another scary development. As you know, the last two Australian foreign correspondents in China had to flee the country last year. We reported that here. Now, it was clear that to them that they could be the very next journalists to be arrested for telling the world the truth about that tyranny. And now Britain's BBC has had to pull out its correspondent as well. Also, his journalist wife has been pulled out by her Irish employers. John Sudworth fled after the harassment by secret police of him and his wife and his family got extremely serious.
It won't come as any surprise to you that as a result of my reporting over the last few years on subjects that you've mentioned there, Xinjiang, the origins of the virus, Hong Kong, those sorts of sensitive stories for China, we have come under increasing pressure from the authorities. But that has really intensified in recent weeks and months, including a pretty intense propaganda campaign targeted not just at the BBC, but at me personally and at my reporting. We have faced legal threats and increased surveillance and harassment whenever and wherever we try to film.
So let's not let this bullying, this attempt to censor and silence work. Let me now show you one of the reports, or some of it, that made China think that this journalist had to be menaced and threatened and silenced. The report by Sudworth on one of the many concentration camps that Muslim Uyghur Chinese have been sent to, locked up in, one of the many that have been cleaned up just to fool journalists from the West.
China used to deny that these places exist. But now we're being given a tour. The message? These are schools, not prisons.
他们受到一定的极端思想感染以后，为了就是把自己思想里面的极端思想的感染程度去除。
But the more we ask, have you been convicted of a crime?
我没有犯罪，我就是犯的错。
How often are you able to pray here?
国家法律规定学校公共场所，公共场所不能从事宗教活动。
The more evidence we try to gather of our own, the more questions there are.
Sudworth is a smart journalist. He wouldn't be fooled. No wonder China was upset, because he later discovered just how far China went to make that concentration camp that he went to look like a holiday camp.
In some of the places we're being taken to, the satellite images show that the internal security fencing and what look like watchtowers were taken down shortly before the tours for journalists began. And empty exercise yards have been transformed into sports facilities.
The Nazis used to play that same trick with journalists and officials with its concentration camps. Cleaned up one and said, look, it's beautiful. John Sudworth, that's a BBC correspondent putting his freedom on the line to bring the West the truth about this genocidal dictatorship. But New Zealand has a government that won't even say boo. Instead, it sucks up to this very same regime in exchange for a bit of money. And it leaves it to braver countries like Australia to do the fighting and to take the pain.